Welcome to Brown Brothers Book Banter, the podcast where Kenneth and Kyle dive into the vibrant world of children's literature. Join us each week as we explore the enchanting realm of books featuring insightful interviews with renowned children's book authors, discussions on the latest title releases, and inspiring conversations with passionate librarians. Now, here are your hosts, Kenneth and Kyle Brown.
Hey, Kyle.
Hey, brother, episode 9 is here.
First one after Thanksgiving. Did you have a nice Thanksgiving?
Had a great Thanksgiving. Had 3 Thanksgivings. How about you?
Well, of course, our family, you and our mom and our dad and everybody, we did it on the 12th, way early, because your son was in town.
Yep, and then he jetted off before Thanksgiving, and so I this is my first Thanksgiving in 23 years that I have not spent Thanksgiving Day with my son. So that was definitely different. Definitely different.
Interesting football games to watch that had Oklahoma ties to it. That was fun watching those.
Excited to see an Oklahoma team in the Big 12 championship game.
Yes.
Is that coming up, I guess, this weekend? So
yes.
Hopefully OSU can pull out a win against Texas, and then both Oklahoma teams will have taken out Texas this year. That'd be nice.
Yes, that would be good.
You've been working on the newsletter. You're our newsletter guy. You do such an amazing job. You put a lot of great stuff into the newsletter, a lot of which was provided by our newsletter readers.
Well, last week in our newsletter, we asked people to sign up to win a signed copy of How the Grinch Lost Christmas by our good friend Alistair Heim. And we asked the question, what are some of your favorite read-alouds and library activities for Christmas? And we usually do things too late, but here we are. It's still November, so there's some good chances for people to find these books in their library collection. And then we've got some great activities. This will all be on our newsletter. I think we're going to post a link to that on brownbrothersbooks.com somewhere. I think probably around the podcast, and maybe even in the notes on our YouTube video of this. So if you see that link, it'll get you to a PDF that has the things we're talking about. But there's some great books that were mentioned several times. You know, the best Christmas pageant ever. It's actually the best Christmas pageant ever, but the word worst is marked out on the cover. That was one that I saw several times. Of course, How the Grinch Stole Christmas and the brand new How the Grinch Lost Christmas are favorites. There's some fun ones that several of the series do. Pete the Cat Saves Christmas. Mustache Baby. There's one Mustache Baby. I can't find it on my list, but it's there. And then there's the traditional ones, Christmas Tapestry, Legend of the Poinsettia, The Night Before Christmas. There's about 50 different versions of that one, whether it's The Night Before Christmas, Teacher's Night Before Christmas, NASCAR Driver's Night Before Christmas. There's a ton of those out there.
I think some of those that you're mentioning, some of those might be out of print.
Yes, and in fact, a lot of the books that people submitted to us were out of print, so you may not be able to find them unless
you may already have them in your library. Yeah,
they may be there. So great stuff. Polar Express is always a good one.
Love that one, and the movie.
There's one called Shooting at the Stars that looks good. It's a historical fiction one where two armies or two they were battling each other, and I think they stopped for Christmas and kind of celebrated together. So in the midst of a battle. So, good stuff up there.
Yeah. And if you get our newsletter and you look at that list and we're missing something, we're probably going to be releasing an updated list every single year. So please email us at brownbrothersbooks@gmail.com and tell us a book that maybe is missing from that list. And if you're not getting the newsletter, you can also put into that email address that you'd like to be added to our newsletter.
Yes.
So what about activities, Kenneth?
There's a ton, and I was searching to supplement some of the ideas that were sent to us. Teachers Pay Teachers has a ton of stuff, and usually they're just like $1 to $3. It's not a big deal. Some fun ones I saw were Christmas bookmark design contest. And the top 3 are copied and distributed to everybody. One librarian said that they have students and staff hunt for elves hidden in the stacks. I went one time and read at a school in Mustang. They had their library turned into a train,
Oh, wow.
and the Polar Express, and they would have guest readers come in and read the Polar Express to classes. So it was like this big tunnel that they had made out of like black visqueen, and there were chairs and rows just like the kids were on a train. That was really fun. There's all kinds of crafts, bingo games that you can play. I like this one for creative writing. There you have kind of a chart, a 6x6 chart, I believe, or just 6 rows, and they roll a dice, and it'll have story starters and different parts of stories with Christmas prompts that they can do a writing. And here's one. You remember we used to play that game Spoons with our family?
Oh, yeah. Love Spoons.
That was a fun one. Boy, that was, we had some real battles with spoons. But there's one that said, after reading 'Twas the Night Before Christmas, the students sit at tables and jingle bells are put on the table, one fewer than the number of students.
Oh.
And every time they hear a simile, they grab a bell, kind of like the Spoons card game. So, students with the bell, without a bell can be out or not, but she did say that it gets pretty competitive. That sounds like a fun thing. Everything from designing ugly sweaters, Christmas, trivia. Oh, another great STEM activity. You can use green Solo cups and build a Christmas tree from the base to the top and do some STEM activities with that. I think I saw that in Teachers Pay Teachers, and I saw it on Instagram. Just really great stuff. If you want to do a research project, you can do it, on reindeer, maybe something like that. Other great STEM activities. I saw a Santa parachute where Santa has to land in a certain spot, and they use a coffee filter. Gingerbread man escape zip line. That looked fun. So lots of great ideas. In the newsletter, we will be putting images that we found online, Instagram and other things, of great Christmas time decorations for the library. So we're going to do a contest, Kyle. What do you think we might do with that?
We are going to post on our Facebook page, just a regular Brown Brothers Books Facebook page. Show us your best Christmas display. And granted, it can't be something you found on Instagram. It needs to be your display. But then if we encourage you to ask your friends to vote by doing the like button by your Christmas display, and the top 3 Christmas displays will win prizes. First place prize will be a signed copy of How the Grinch Lost Christmas. And we're not sure on second and third place yet, but we'll figure out something. And so definitely look for that post on the Brown Brothers Facebook page and share it with us and everybody else. And then we will highlight some of those if we get to have a Christmas podcast. We're in the works on putting together a Christmas podcast, and that is something that we would love to share in the Christmas podcast. So keep look out for that and share your best Christmas displays.
Yes, we're working with Random House to try to get access to a very special author who has written one of those new books on our list. If we can get him, that would be a great Christmas podcast guest. And coming up on this podcast, if those of you who went to our Library Appreciation Day about 13 or 14 months ago, we had various videos from authors giving a special positive message to librarians. And the very best one we received was from Ruta Sepetys, our dear friend. And she told a great story about how important librarians are and the job that they do. And we've asked her for permission, and we're going to put it at the end of this podcast. And so if you missed that day, or even if you just wanted to see it again, it's just a really special, heartwarming message. And she has a fairly new book about writing called You, the Story. And so many young people are being able to use it to do creative writing. So that's another one to be looking for. You might want to make sure you have it on your shelf, probably middle school, high school on that.
And speaking of writing, a lot of you all don't know, but when we do the Sequoia videos this past year, this is before the podcast, we actually asked the authors a whole bunch of questions that we are, because time is limited, we haven't quite gotten to putting those videos out yet. But Kenneth has started going through them. And one of the common things that we asked quite a number of authors was writing tips. And so hopefully one of the first podcasts after the new year, we will share some of those writing tips in a podcast, and then you all can share the ones that you all like with your students. You can take clips from it, however you want to use those things. But hopefully we'll be able to share a lot of really good information about those authors after the beginning of the year to maybe give you another opportunity to promote the Sequoias in a different manner, just by asking them and getting to know the authors a little bit more than just their book talk.
Yes. And it's always a fun summer meeting with all those authors and interviewing them and having them do the Sequoia book talks. If you're looking for a great resource to kind of give a second wind to your Sequoia program, you can go to our website, brownbrothersbooks.com. Under the Sequoias, you can watch the videos from all three master lists and watch them talk about their books. We also have a part there where you can look at author visit information. If you're looking for a spring visit for an author, some of them do free virtual visits, 20-minute visits if you have a book club or a whole class that is reading one of those Sequoia books. So make sure you check those out.
Now I want to talk about new books. I know last week there weren't very many releases. We are going to be taking a week, possibly 2 weeks off from this podcast. So Kenneth has gathered a list of some exciting titles that are coming out. And what is the time frame on those, Kenneth? Is it are some of them after Christmas, or are they all before? What do you got for us today?
Well, books are released by the major publishers on Tuesdays. So this Tuesday, the 28th of November, which was yesterday when we're filming this, but all the way through December 19th. The next Tuesday after that is the 26th, and we think we'll be having a podcast between now and then. We can mention those. But I have noticed that the publishers really don't release a ton of books, whereas one publisher might release 2 or 3 in a week. Now they're 1 or none is what I'm finding. So there's not a bunch of them. But since I have 3 weeks of books here, this list is a little bit longer than normal. So let's start. Everybody's been looking for this one in the middle grades. Cat Kid Comic Club Influencers by Dav Pilkey. Very popular series. I've been looking through some of my orders that people have placed, and that book is on just about every one. And in fact, I think there's about 1,000 going through the binding process right now. So we're going to have plenty very soon, we hope. Another one we saw, Cynthia Rylant, big favorite of everybody. She has some books about Hornbeam, and there's one called Hornbeam All In, and it has gotten 4-starred reviews already. And it's about Hornbeam the moose, and he helps his friend with some things and learns how to swim with Adorabelle, which must be one of the characters. So that looked pretty good. The other day I was watching a little bit of a story about Temple Grandin, and she has ones coming out. I mean, her research was used in it. Somebody else, I think, really put it together. But it's called Different Kinds of Minds: A Guide to Your Brain. Talks about Albert Einstein, Steve Jobs. It asks students, do you write stories, act in plays, slay at Wordle, and just really goes into a lot of neat things about the brain and what you're good at, and just talks about how your brain works. Another one, A Story No One Has Ever Heard Before by Avi Steinberg. This was for lower grades. It's inspired by a carrot on the run, a knight who'd trade his sword for a pal, and an alien who just wants to get some rest and relaxation. That sounded pretty fun.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be very whimsically witty and gloriously goofy. Here's another one. Didn't See That Coming by Jesse Q. Sutano. This has 1-star review, and it's a rom-com about a gamer girl with a secret identity and the online bestie she's never met until she unwittingly transfers to his school. That's for YA.
Oh, that sounds good.
Yes. Here's one that could be a good Christmas present. How to Love a Grandma by Gene Reagan. That one's fun. Lower grades. Here's a YA steampunk. Kingdom of Without by Andrea Tang, where a 17-year-old who is a wily young thief must use her wits to survive in an alternate futuristic Beijing.
Oh.
How about Betting on You by Lynn Painter, another YA. When they first meet, Bailey and Charlie cannot stand one another. But when they met a year later as co-workers, Charlie secretly bets a colleague he can get Bailey to go out with him. And the relationship gets more complicated as they get closer and closer. Now, there's a new movie coming out, prequel to Willy Wonka. This one's based on the motion picture. It gives Roald Dahl credit, even though he has passed away. But some other people adapted it, and it's based on the motion picture. And it's supposed to be really good. Great cover on that one, too. Here's one with 1-starred review. Creep Leak Crunch, a food chain story for lower grades by Jody Jensen Schaefer. It's a nonfiction picture book that shows how the animal kingdom's food chain takes shape from the lowly worm to the mighty king of the jungle.
Ooh, I wonder if that could be a possible one to look at for the Redbuds. You know, we're always trying to find a good nonfiction title.
Speaking of Redbuds, Maria Jean Ferrari, who was on the Redbuds several years ago, she has written one, To Dogs with Love, a love letter to the dogs who help us. And it gives thanks to every human's best friend. And it has an emphasis on service dogs. And it's written by animal expert, as I said, Maria Jean Ferrari. That's for lower grades. Just a couple more. Make Me a Liar by Melissa Landers. Looks good. It's a YA. Veronica Mars gets a fantastical twist in this novel about a girl with a transferable consciousness who uses her power for good, but only to have it turned around on her when someone uses her body to commit murder. Then she has to solve the crime before the killer comes after her. I may have to read that one. That sounds
I'm
great.
wondering, Veronica Mars, I guess it's probably just a coincidence. This isn't the Veronica Mars there were some novels, but it was also a TV show.
Did she have powers like that where she could kind of transfer?
No, that's why I don't know. She was just a detective, but it's interesting that they chose such a widely known character name, but maybe it was an ode to Veronica Mars because maybe the author is a big Veronica Mars fan.
And we've met authors who have come to Oklahoma and visited and then end up using the librarians that they meet. I remember Dan Gutman, I think, used my friend Dan Mills in his name in a book that he wrote. And so I know that authors do that a lot.
Yeah.
You know, Joan Bauer, there's a story there.
We don't know.
Well, Joan Bauer came to Oklahoma and met us. And, you know, Kyle's son has a history of loving baseball, playing baseball, but also having heart issues. And not heart, like physical heart issues, not issues about playing the game with heart. But she did write a story that, you know, had some qualities of that, where a young man who was into baseball did have some limitations. And it was really neat that we think that maybe that stemmed from... It
could have been just a coincidence.
Yes.
Could have been inspired. Either way, I love the fact that there was a story out there about a kid that played baseball that had heart issues, and so I'm glad to know that book is out there.
Yeah, that was an honor, and she's great. Every time we see her, she's
amazing.
She remembers.
She runs up to us and hugs us. I mean, doesn't get any better than that.
Yeah, with countless stories, too, of authors that we've met and hung out with, where they talk about how they get inspiration for sometimes their next novel just by doing school visits, the kids they meet, the stories that they see, the experiences being in certain buildings or certain towns. So, you know, when you invite an author to your school, you never know what might happen.
You never know.
All right, last one as far as an in-depth mention of a book, Facing the Enemy. How a Nazi youth camp in America tested a friendship. This is historical fiction, YA, based in the 1930s. where two best friends are torn apart when one attends a Nazi youth camp for German Americans and the other one forms an anti-Nazi vigilante group. So that sounds interesting. Here's some new series books that are coming out in the next few weeks. And Kyle, do you want to run down that list?
Yes, that's great. First off, we have Henry Heckelbeck Makes Super Slime, number 14. We also have Desmond Cole Ghost Patrol, number 20, Time to Clown Around. I know that Desmond Cole Ghost Patrol is very popular.
Yes.
She Persisted.
Opal Lee, yeah, that's a great series, nonfiction biographies, and so there's a new one coming out there.
Bad Kitty Does Not Like Easter, so we've got an Easter book coming out. Angelina's Big City Ballet and the Angelina Ballerina series. Dragon Boy and the 100 Hearts, Dragon Boy number 3.
That might be a Valentine's Day since it's talking about hearts.
Oh, that's I bet we could tell by looking at the cover maybe.
Yes.
Lots of new Ready to Read level books. You want to go? Yeah. Are there any listings there or no?
No, Simon & Schuster just put out a whole bunch in 1 week, one of the next few weeks, and so if you're looking for new Ready to Read level books, there's a bunch that are just come out.
YA books, The Beautiful Quartet in the Ruined series. We also have Sisters Ever After, The Last Rose, also a middle grades. The Missing Sword Chronicles of Never After, number 4, middle grades. And Mercy Watson is Missing, Tales from the Decawoo Drive.
And of course, that is
number 7.
Kate D. Camillo, who we've met and we love. And she has been on the Sequoia list for books. And boy, isn't she great.
She is. And one thing I love about her is every time we meet her and every time we ask her for a video, she is so generous and gets right back to us in emails. So there's some authors that just hold a special place in your heart. And she is definitely one of those authors.
Well, these next 3 weeks are not easy for educators. The kids are all riled up and excited for the holiday break and Christmas time. So we just want to let everybody know that we're here for you. We're thinking about you, all the things that are going on, and we appreciate you listening. But again, this is our gift to you. We have Ruta Sepetys coming up. She's going to tell a really, really great story that some of you have heard. Some of you may want to listen to again, and this might be the first time, but you might grab a tissue because your eyes might produce some kind of a liquid thing when you're listening. But we're very thankful to her for helping us or allowing us to share this with you.
Everybody, enjoy, and you can make it through these next 2 or 3 weeks. So Hang in there, everybody.
Hi, all. I'm Ruta Sepetys, author of historical fiction. And again, so grateful to the Brown brothers and Permabound for inviting me to take part today. The Brown brothers and Permabound have supported me for over a decade, since my very first book, Between Shades of Grey, often confused, even on some state lists, with 50 Shades of Grey. But we won't go into that because we all know what's been going on. And that's why I really wanted to take a minute to remind you, perhaps, why you do what you do and why you have chosen to do this, which these days, being a librarian, it is not easy. But at the heart of it is the power of books. And it reminds me of this story that I'm going to share with you to illustrate the power of books. The year was 1941, and as World War II raged, many families were forced to flee from their homes. They ran from dictators and they ran from death. And caught in the bristles of war's broom were millions of innocent little children. And my dad was one of them. Some of you may have heard me explain that my father was forced to escape from Lithuania when the Soviets invaded in 1940. And he walked through Poland and through Austria, and he spent time in many refugee camps. He was forced to leave everything he had ever known and loved behind. And life in the camp, it was really difficult. These kids, they were separated. Some of their fathers, like my grandfather, had to go back and try to fight. And the camps were always fraught with bad news. And so there were these teachers and librarians who decided to organize a story time. And sitting cross-legged and crescent around, the librarian, these kids settled in for their first story. And my father was among them. And books were really hard to find, but they were able to rustle up one story. And so it began. A man named Geppetto carves a talking puppet out of a piece of wood and names this puppet Pinocchio. And the kids, pronounced it Pinocchio in the camp, Pinocchio. And Pinocchio was like a real rascal of a kid. I mean, he was a trickster. He experienced grand duels and great adventures and adventures with a fairy. And he was traveling over land and sea and trying to escape capture. And I have to tell you, this was not the mid-century Disney version of Pinocchio, okay? This was the original version of Pinocchio that was written in the 1800s by Carlo Carlotti. And when the book was released, it was met with such resistance because, and I actually had to write this down, the parents and teachers just thought this was terrible. It was harrowing. There were guns and monsters. And get this, Pinocchio was captured, stabbed, whipped, starved, jailed, punched in the head, and had his legs burned off. And you know what? The refugee kids, they loved it. They absolutely loved it because just like Pinocchio, these kids had been on these grand adventures over land and sea, and some of them dreamed of reuniting with their beloved papas that they had been separated from. And my father, who was 4 years old at the time, he found comfort through an unlikely friend through which he had something in common because just like Pinocchio, my dad dreamed of one day being a real boy, a free boy. And, as authors, sometimes it's hard to measure the impact of our books. We never know how our stories might hold a child, might feed a child, might make the world less lonely for one child. But that impact it's everlasting. Every one of you can remember a book that you loved as a small child. That's the power of books and stories and connection. Fast forward, my father himself experienced an incredible life and an incredible story. He survived 9 years in camps. He came to the United States and played soccer and opened a design firm and didn't retire until he was 81 and was still rocking the elliptical afterward. And when the pandemic hit, Dad, in his retirement community, they were on complete lockdown and he was completely isolated. And he had a couple of falls, which resulted in head injuries. And those were sort of also compounded by the fact that he had been an athlete and had also had some head injuries. And long story short, my dear father experienced this type of vascular dementia. And as his caregiver, I tried to help him. Music didn't help. Chatting with him, he no longer knew who he was, where he was, or what he was. And he certainly didn't know who I was. So sometimes I would resort to, children's programming or cartoons. One day, a nurse accidentally put on coverage of the war in Ukraine. And you can imagine what that did to my dear father, having escaped from the Soviets himself, to see this. It was absolutely traumatic. So we went back to children's programming. And one day I had stepped away for a moment to grab the comb to comb his hair. And as I turned my back, I heard him gasp. And I whipped around and he was pointing to the TV and he looked at me and he said, "Pinocchio, Pinocchio, my friend." The peace, the comfort, the delight. My father didn't know who he was, where he was, who I was, but he knew Pinocchio. We never know how our stories might feed a soul, might hold a soul, might make the world less lonely for one soul. It happened for my dad at 4 years old and over 80 years later. That is the power of what you are doing. You are lamplighters, you are soul soothers, and you are heroes. And I couldn't do it without you. I told the Brown brothers that I don't think anyone runs in to the library or classroom saying, quick, I need a book about Romanian communism. No, you understand what that book holds and what the reader needs. And I am so honored to work with you, and I am so honored to write for your readers. So thank you from the bottom of my heart for helping me do what I think is important work, but I know is my heart's work, like yours. Thank you.